So today we're going to be looking at editing and proofreading. So we will start by defining the terms proofreading and editing. Then we're going to start with editing. We'll go through editing. How do you go about editing your work? And then we're going to have a break and we'll come back and look at how to proofread your work. All right. So editing refers to the process where the writer decides to review the writing with the focus on the overall content and logical flow. So underline here, content and logical flow. Whereas proofreading, is the last stage of the revision where you then focus on superficial errors like the grammar, the punctuation, right? And that is the main difference between editing and proofreading. So the one focuses on your higher order concerns, which are your content, the structure of your work, if you are adhering to the assignment requirements, the assignment instructions, and the other focuses on your referencing, spelling, grammar, formatting. And why do you always start with editing? Why does the editing process take place throughout your work, whereas the proofreading should be the last stage? Simply because a well-edited work will secure you more marks than a well-proofread work. So you can look at your grammar, look at your formatting, and it's perfect. But if you're not answering the question correctly, if your work is not well-structured, then higher chances are you will not have a good mark, right? That is why it's always important to focus on the editing process first before moving on to your proofreading stage. So editing will then require you to really focus on, your careful analysis of the text or your question and critical thinking, whereas proofreading requires a great deal of attention because you need to ensure that that punctuation mark is where it's supposed to be, that, sentence is well structured, the full stop is where it's supposed to be, the tenses are okay, and so on. So great detail to attention. Whereas editing is, do I have my topic sentences? Do they answer my question? Does the referencing link to my question? How does it do so? So it really will bring out your critical analytical skills. So let's look at what is the purpose of editing. So you edit first because number one, you want to check if you're compliant with the assignment instructions. Then you want to check if the audience is appropriate, the content, does your content, answer the question. Did you structure your work based on the assignment instructions or the type of work that you're doing? How did you organize your ideas, right? So let's look at the steps to edit. So before you start with your editing, one thing you want to do is to create some distance between you and your text. So you've written your first draft, you've unpacked the question, you've brainstormed, and you've written your first draft. So what you want to do is not to edit immediately. So you want to maybe wait 3 hours or even the next day or next 2 days, but don't let it sit for too long because you might just be thinking it through from the start and it will feel as if you're rewriting your work from the start. So what you want to do is to create some distance and just let it sit for about 3 hours and to the next day preferably. And then you want to then start your editing process. Then you will choose how you prefer to edit. Would you like to edit using your computer, your phone, so an online medium, or would you rather print it out and edit using paper? I usually advise students to edit using a different medium from that which they wrote the assignment. So let's say you type out your assignment. When you were writing, you used your computer. To edit, it would be preferable to maybe print it out. Just because when you use a different medium, it kind of gives you a sense of not deja vu, right? So it gives you a sense of doing this for the first time, which is always good to edit with a fresh eye. That is why you need to create that distance. So a change of medium creates more distance, which will be more effective for your editing process. Then you want to choose a suitable place to work, because this process is quite, daunting, and you need to pay specific attention to certain details. You want to choose a space that will be appropriate, free from distractions. Then you want to avoid long stretches of work. As I said, you want to create some distance, but not too long, right? So you don't want to wait 3-4 days after writing before editing. And the last thing that is truly important is to ask a friend, a colleague to read your work, or Queen. You can also ask me, the literacy consultant, to go through your work. Because when you write your work, sometimes you write it, and then when you read it or you edit it, you read what is in your mind, what you meant to write, not what is actually on paper. And because you took time and a lot of effort and days, to work through that specific assignment, sometimes you can't pick up the mistakes. But if someone else reads that work, they have some distance between the work and themselves, so they're able to see these mistakes better than you would. And that is why at every stage, even when you will write, or you're writing your master's, your PhD, or any long research, you see that it's always required. It's mostly a requirement for most universities, regardless of you being a first language speaker, or regardless of you, being an English major. Most universities will require you to give your work for editing, right? Simply because when someone else looks at your work with a fresh eye, they're able to pick out those mistakes that you may not see because you're so invested in your own work. So always leave and start your work early, leave enough time so that you're able to, give your work to someone else to just have a look and help with your editing process. So we're going to look at every stage of our editing, starting with the most important, which is editing for content, right? Simply because you want to start with editing for content, because if your content is wrong, it doesn't matter how much beautiful grammar you use, you may not pass, right? If you did not answer the question correctly. So the first thing you want to do is to, first unpack your question. Ensure that you're answering the question correctly. Look at, as we discuss when addressing or unpacking questions, look at your tax words, limit words, and topic words, and then underline any difficult words, brainstorm, and then you want to check when you're editing. You want to review that, right? Ensuring that you're answering the question. Then now looking at your content, does the opening paragraph provide a clear indication of the purpose of the text, right? So you want to check your introduction. Are you able to really indicate the purpose of that specific text? Then you want to ask yourself, does every part of the text contribute to the key idea in a meaningful whole? Now, this is one question that will really prevent you from digressing in your work, right? So when you write a sentence, you always need to ask yourself, does this specific sentence answer my question? Because everything you write needs to be a direct answer to your question. It needs to be linked to the question. Does the purpose remain clear throughout? And if everything is linked, then the purpose will be clear. Sometimes students get excited about what they're writing or invested, and then, start going off topic, right? Or writing more than is needed. So you need to constantly ask yourself, am I answering my question? Is my purpose clear? Does the sentence link to my purpose? Are there no digressions, talking about something that is not answering the question? The next thing is you need to ask yourself if the references that you're using support your argument. And this is something very important and very prevalent in students' work, where you see students including a reference or a citation that does not support the specific argument. It could be relevant to the question, but the placement of it could be wrong, right? So perhaps that reference will work in the the third paragraph, but for this specific paragraph, it's not working. It's not supporting that specific argument. Now, remember, with essay writing, every paragraph, or not even just essay, academic writing, every paragraph should focus on one single idea, right? That is the golden rule of writing paragraphs. One paragraph, one idea. Be it literature reviews, report writing, essay writing, one paragraph, one single idea. So you don't want to say in your topic sentence that you're discussing the use of apps, for example, in higher education. And then somewhere through your work, you provide a reference that speaks about maybe, the use of the internet, in education. The internet is different from the use of apps, right? These are two different sources of technology. So you want to be careful that the specific source that you are using is actually answering your question. Your explanations clear? Do they clearly explain your topic sentence? Are the conclusions relevant and clear as well? So these questions will kind of guide you in order to ensure that you have your content is it's focused and answering your question. Then you want to edit for the structure, organization and structure. So here really what is important here, firstly, is to know the specific structure or guidelines of that assignment. That is, are you writing an argumentative essay? Are you writing a report? Are you writing a scientific report, a business report? Are you writing an annotated bibliography? Are you writing a literature review? What exactly are you writing? Because each of these type of assignments have their specific structure. So first you need to know what is the academic structure for that type of assignment. Once you know that, then you're able to structure your work to adhere to those rules, right? So this is the basic structure, the one we're looking at of the essay, just to provide an example of how you will edit an essay for organization and structure. So when you look at organization and structure, the first thing you want to look at is the bigger picture. So if it's an essay, do you have an introduction? Do you have body? Do you have a conclusion? I recently reviewed a student's work. It was a literature review, and there was no introduction, there was no conclusion. There was just the review, right? Even literature reviews need an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. So the first thing is, the organization. So did you adhere to this bigger picture? So the introduction, conclusion, and body paragraphs. Then within each of these sections, now we look at the structure, the cohesion, the logical flow of ideas. That is, the students include, all necessary components of each of these sections, starting with the introduction. Now, what should an introduction include? You will ask yourself these questions. So, number one, do you have a context? Did you have an opening statement that kind of tells the reader what the context of your assignment will be? Some kind of an introduction to your writing. So let's say you're writing about, the effects of technology in higher education. And your context could be something like, we moved from the first industrial revolution with no technology use in education to the fourth industrial revolution, where education is, highly characterized by artificial intelligence and technology, right? Full stop. So that is the context. So basically, you want to provide some kind of background information to your topic, regardless of the type of writing. You will see that with proposals, we call it background, right? And with literature review, it's context. With essays, it's context. Providing context just helps situate your work before actually stating what your purpose is. So most types of academic writing will advise that or suggest that the introduction starts with a clear context, after which you want to then define clearly what the aim is. So when editing, ask yourself, Has my aim been clearly indicated, right? And sometimes it's important to think or to ensure that your aim is not, mixed or confused with the outline, which is the scope. Now, sometimes students intertwine these two, so they merge it. In some cases, it could work, but not in all cases. Sometimes the student will say this essay discusses, the background, and then it talks about, the reasons why this happened, and then discusses the effects. So you are telling the reader the different three major sections, but what is the core of that essay? What is the reason why you're writing that work? So in one sentence, you would then state the purpose. In providing the background, in providing the causes, in providing the effects, what are you trying to do, right? So the main purpose of this essay or this report is to discuss, the effects of technology by, number one, looking at the background, focusing on the reasons, and ending with the effects. So you see that you have told us the main focus and how you will structure it, which is the scope. So ask yourself, is the purpose clear and is the outline clear? With point number 3, has main concepts be clearly defined? It's not always the case in all academic texts that you will have to define main terms, but if the term has various definitions and it's the focus of that specific assignment, and you think not knowing the definition might lead to confusion, then it's important that you actually define the main concept. So the definition will situate your argument, to tell the reader that this is what you believe this concept means, and that means you will argue around that. So ask yourself if every or the main term has been clearly defined. Then you want to move to the body paragraphs. With each paragraph, you want to ask yourself, has the topic sentence been clearly stated? Now, when it comes to topic sentences, I will advise you don't cite your topic sentences. Try to write it in your own words. It's just one short, clear sentence that tells the reader what the paragraph will be about. But always ask yourself, does my topic sentence answer my question as you edit? If it doesn't, rewrite it. Then your explanation, what we call supporting sentences. Does it explain the point you mentioned previously? Did you provide examples to support your explanation? Did you back that up with evidence or research? And is this evidence, is this research or citations, are they relevant to your topic? Right? You need to ask yourself, are they relevant to your specific topic? Okay. Then you want to also ensure that, this research is explained linking to your argument. So don't just put the references standing, always conclude showing the explanation or relevance of those references to your topic. Then you want to conclude, and the concluding sentence is that sentence that summarizes the paragraph and introduces the next paragraph, or introduces the next paragraph. So you could simply just summarize the current paragraph, or you could decide to introduce the next paragraph, or you could do both, right? So it has to be one of these three. Once you've asked all these questions, you want to then move to the conclusion. Does your conclusion summarize all the main points addressed? So basically, here you want to check what each paragraph is all about and summarize that. And there's a trick. You could just focus on your topic sentences, because the topic sentence really indicates what the paragraph will be all about. So this means if you focus on the topic sentences, you'll be able to get a general sense of what that paragraph is all about. And that could guide you, in summarizing in your conclusion. Are you able to restate the main purpose that you indicated in the introduction? Did you provide recommendation for the main challenges discussed? Or any concluding remarks? And then in also editing, you need to check and ensure that no new information had been added, because The golden rule of the introduction is that you want the purpose to be clearly stated, or thesis. In the paragraph, the golden rule is one idea per paragraph. And in the conclusion, no new information. And by no new information, we simply mean not adding a new point. So for example, if you are discussing the reasons why education systems use technology, you want to then come in the conclusion and provide some recommendations. That is okay. Recommendations are mostly new information. You're providing some kind of a way forward in your conclusion. So it's new. What we mean no new information, we mean a new point. Let's say you're discussing the reasons for the use of technology and you discuss 5 reasons. Then decide in the conclusion that you're going to add number 6. That is wrong. Or you're discussing the effects of technology in higher education, and you discuss 5 effects, and then you decide in the conclusion you're going to add effect number 6. That is wrong. If you want to add an effect or a point, do so in the body and then just summarize that in the conclusion. So avoid adding new information in the conclusion. And that is something you will look at when editing, just to double check that no new information was added. After you've edited for organization, for content, you've edited for, organization, you want to then, let me just highlight a few other structures, right? So what we have just done is we've looked at the structure of an AC. When it comes to scientific reports and you're editing for organization and structure, this is how a scientific report presents, right? It has an abstract, an introduction, methods, findings, results, conclusion, and appendices. So this means when you're editing for structure, the first thing is to check if all these sections have been included. Then you want to now go for each section, starting with the abstract. An abstract for a scientific report needs to have a clear aim. It needs to have the methods, the results, and hypothesis if you use hypothesis. Then you will have an introduction where you have the background, same as the context. But here, what is important is you need to, again, repeat what your hypothesis is as well as the aim. So you see with the scientific reports, the aim and the hypothesis are repeated in the abstract as well as in the introduction. Then with the methods, you want to include, the methods you use to carry your data, your participants, your setting. Then with your findings, what were your findings? What are the results based on the findings, on the data? What are the results? What are your conclusions? Then you want to present appendices. So any information that you use, you may present that in the form of appendices. So editing for organization and structure will ensure that not only do you have these different headings, but that the information within each of these headings have been provided. Then we have business reports. Business reports usually have an executive summary, a table of content, introduction, and then body paragraphs depending on the topic with headings mostly. And then it should have recommendations. So if editing for a business report, what you want to ensure, number one, in terms of organization, you want to check that all these topics have been included. Then you want to go within each topic. The executive summary should have summarized the main points, should have a methodology. They summarize the methodology that you use, present the findings, right? And then the table of content, especially for long business reports. Then the introduction should present the problems as well as recommendations, and each body paragraph should discuss one main point. And then at the end of business reports, you should provide recommendations for the challenges discussed, right? Then we have case studies that are not far from ACEs. The only difference with the case study is that it doesn't always use, let's start with the introduction. So the introduction for the AC will have context, purpose, outline. With the case study, however, you just introduce the problem and then state the purpose. You don't have to necessarily include an outline of the different aspects to be discussed in each paragraph the way you do with the AC. Then with the body paragraphs, you don't necessarily need to use the PIL, right? The PIL meaning, a topic sentence, supporting sentences, explanation, evidence, and concluding sentence. You could discuss what is important with the case study. You could have your headings as well. But what is important is to discuss one idea per paragraph and try to link paragraphs to each other using your linking words. Then the case study, the conclusion. With the essay, you could summarize, you should summarize, have the purpose and recommendations or concluding remarks. But with the case study, you must have recommendations. So you will restate your aim or the purpose, summarize main points, and you should provide recommendations. Okay, so once you've edited for structure, as you can see, different types of academic writing have different type of structures. So again, what you want to do firstly is to just double check, right? Make sure that you know what the structure of that specific assignment is. Is it an essay? Is it case studies? Is it a proposal? Because proposals also have the structure. Is it a business report? What is it? Then look for the structure of that specific type of writing, which mostly will be provided in your assignment rubric. Mostly lecturers will tell you what they expect, right? So your tutorial letter or your assignment instructions is always the first place to go. If nothing has been mentioned, then you can just go on Google and Google the structure of case studies, for example, and then you can follow that, ensuring you maintain the bigger picture as well as the structure within each section. Once you're done with that, then you want to edit for coherence. Now, coherence is, the logical flow of ideas in your work. So how do ideas flow between one sentence to the other and one paragraph to the other? Right? So are there the questions you will ask yourself for coherence is, are there topic sentences in each paragraph that summarizes the key points of that paragraph? Are the paragraphs unified? That is, do they contain one single idea? Has every paragraph been given sufficient weighting? And this is seen number one through the eye. So when I look at your work, I need to see paragraphs of approximate length. So that means there shouldn't be a paragraph of 1-2 sentences and another paragraph of 7 to 10 sentences. Then already just from the eye, there's no cohesion, because you can see that one paragraph was given a lot of attention. So they explained, they provided so many references, and the other paragraph is just 2 sentences, right? So you want to always check the weighting, making sure that every paragraph was given equal attention. So if you use 2 references in one paragraph, try to use 2 references in other paragraphs. The difference should be maybe 1, meaning if you use 3 here, you could use 4 there, or you could use 2 there. Don't make the gap too wide to say one paragraph will have 1 reference while the other paragraph has 6 references. That already is, the weighting will not be the same. Or you explain using 7 sentences in one paragraph and the other you explain using 1 sentence. So just try to make sure that if you will have your topic sentences and then you explain in 2 sentences for each paragraph, then you provide 2 references for each, and then you analyze it with 1 sentence or 2, and then you conclude. So just having this clear structure on how you want to approach each point will ensure cohesion and coherence. So does the text then flow from one paragraph to the next? Now, in terms of cohesion, this is usually the greatest foe, in students' work, to say, okay, they don't really show how one paragraph links to the other. So the cohesion is there within the paragraph, but the flow between one paragraph to the other is sometimes missing, right? So in editing your work, ask yourself if there is a flow between one paragraph to the next. This can be seen through what we call linking sentences or concluding sentences and linking devices or signposting language. So basically, the last sentence of the current paragraph should introduce the next idea. So when concluding this paragraph, you can introduce the next. There needs to be some kind of a word, some kind of an idea in the last sentence of a paragraph that directly links to the next paragraph. And that is cohesion. No matter the type of writing or texts, reports, case studies, literature reviews, doing that will really improve on your cohesion. Then the use of linking words like moreover, however, in contrast, again, furthermore, additionally, these linking words, will provide or attach two paragraphs to each other. So use your linking sentences and your linking words to provide that link between each paragraph. Then the next thing you want to look at is, if the vocabulary is not repeated. So are the sentence structure and vocabulary varied? So you want to vary your vocabulary. So don't use furthermore, furthermore, furthermore throughout your work. You want to use furthermore in some areas, moreover, in addition, additionally, again, another, just vary them. That again brings in a beautiful logical flow of ideas. So this is an example of how to really show the weightings in your paragraphs, right? So let's say you are discussing and you are in your first paragraph, you're identifying an issue, you're providing the causes, the solution, 2 to 3 references. So that means the second paragraph should be the same. So when you have your brainstorming and you have something like this, that will guide you, to provide some kind of equal weighting in your work. Okay, now mechanics, you don't have to focus with mechanics. You can have a quick, look, but mechanics are really your proofreading, right? So with mechanics, this is where you really proofread your work. So we will really look at this when we look at proofreading. So some people will include this, but it's always advisable to separate your editing and proofreading stages, right? So what you want to do then is to have a checklist at the end of your assignment. Does the content answer the question? You put a tick. Should any information be added or deleted? Is the work coherent? Does the content suit the audience or purpose of writing? Is the work in line with the academic writing? Does the piece follow appropriate conventions regarding overall format? So if it's an argumentative essay, does it follow the structures of an argumentative essay or a comparative essay? Is the writing clear, exact, and concise? Has all instructions been followed? Are sentences of appropriate length and structure? If subheadings are allowed, are they used effectively? Are sections and paragraphs of appropriate length? Should any tables and figures be added or deleted? Should tables or figures, if tables or figures are included, are they well designed? Will typographic devices such as italics or bullets be helpful? Is the piece well organized at various levels? So asking these questions will kind of ensure that you have edited your work appropriately. Now, this is an example of the introduction of an essay. What I would like for you to do, the information has been included disorderly, right? In a disordered manner. So not following the structure, context, definition, aim, and outline. And when we edit for structure, when we edit for logical flow of ideas, that is, has it followed the appropriate conventions of a specific type of writing? It's this, right? With an essay, you have to have the context first, define terms next, then state the aim, then outline. You don't do it in the order in which you want to do it. So this is the mistake that students make. They include all the information, but maybe start with the aim first, and then provide definitions, and then come back to the outline, and then go end the introduction with the context. So you will lose marks. You will get the mark for the organization, so you have an introduction, but you will lose marks for cohesion because the ideas have not been presented logically, right? So what I want you to do is to look at this passage and rearrange it in the chat. So I'll just copy paste the passage in the chat so that you don't have to, copy it. You can just rearrange it Or if you rather use the numbers, you can also just use the numbers if you prefer that. So which number comes first? Or rearrange the sentences preferably on what should come first, and then paste that in the chat for me. We're going to give 10 minutes for this activity and carry on with the session. So having done editing, please edit this paragraph for structure and coherence. The structure of the guideline that you're supposed to use is right here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So using this convention, restructure this introduction. 10 minutes, and then we'll look at your work, what you've shared, the feedback. All right. Thank you so much, Rabaji. You've indeed shown that you understand, the process, how to go about, structuring your work in terms of, the context, providing any definition, stating the aim, and, the outline of your introduction. So you have done it correctly, right? Excellent. Well done. Thank you so much for participating. So we're going to have our 10 minutes break, and then we're going to come and then address the second part of our workshop, which is proofreading. So how do you go about proofreading your work? So we will resume at 15:55, where we'll now discuss how to go about proofreading your own work. But before we go for the break, any questions? This is a shorter workshop, unlike the others, because really editing and proofreading is about using the skills, from other workshops, then to include it. So this means if you attended the structure of an essay, it'll be easier for you to follow up, or the language and grammar and language workshop, or the referencing workshop. You can then use the knowledge of these to then edit and proofread your work. As we saw in the previous workshops, having short breaks and rest is very important for memory retention. You're just able to sink in more information. The more you rest, the more you take small breaks in between your learning. Okay, so let's carry on with our workshop. Let's look at the next part, which is proofreading. Okay, so one thing I want to draw your attention to is that try to separate these two stages. So you don't want to edit and proofread at the same time. So when you're editing for content, you don't want to also look at some punctuation mistakes and look at other kind of mistakes. So you want to really focus on one mistake at a time. So if you're editing, focus on the editing process first before going to the proofreading stage. So you want to separate these two. So the aim of proofreading, as we saw in the definition, is really to be able to pick out mistakes in terms of grammar, punctuation, formatting, referencing, right? So this requires great detail to great attention to detail. So you look at your spelling, punctuation, language, referencing, and so on, right? So anything you may have also missed out in the editing stage, you can also fix that in the proofreading stage. So the steps to proofread is not identical to the process of editing. Though they overlap in some respects, it is a good idea to keep them separate. So when you start your your proofreading, what you want to do first on your Word document is to do the spell check. Okay, so you want to start with the spell check. Look at your Word document. Just make sure that the language you have chosen is, English South Africa, English United Kingdom. And then what will happen is, it will highlight all spelling mistakes, and grammatical mistakes are usually highlighted in blue, and then it will highlight the other mistakes in red, the spelling mistakes. It will also highlight some names that it does not recognize in red. So don't accept all changes. You want to really go step by step, clicking on each red or underline aspect, and then, accepting or rejecting. You can reject if it's a name, but it's just not recognizing the name. And if it's a wrong spelling, you can accept that. So that is the first thing you want to do, to just minimize those obvious mistakes. It also highlights the grammatical mistakes in blue. So you want to use your word spell check to firstly get rid of, those obvious mistakes. But don't rely too much on it. For example, if you are making a mistake between homonyms, words that are written differently but pronounced the same, two and two, for example, these are existing words, and the word may not pick it up as a mistake because it is an English word, but the word is wrong, right? So focus on one error at a time. Now, this is very important with proofreading, because proofreading requires details, attention to detail. If you focus on too many things at a time, the probability to really not pick out those mistakes will be greater. So let's say you decide to edit punctuation. Focus only on punctuation. And then edit the tenses, edit capitalization next, and then edit the language next, and then edit the references next. So you want to separate these stages. I know it's a lot, but separating them actually gives you more chances of having a clean work at the end, a work void of too many mistakes. And we all know, that is, leaning you towards an A grade, because a work void of mistakes will definitely make your marker give you more marks. You gain more marks, right? Another really important strategy when proofreading, is you want to then accept that it will be a slow process. I mean, to be able to focus on one mistake at a time, you will not finish in a day, right? It will take a couple of days. It will take time. And then another thing you want to do is to read aloud, to be able to take out or to differentiate what is in your mind and what is on paper. And it also helps you to easily identify pauses, and which means there needs to be a comma, or there needs to be a full stop, or you cannot breathe, which means maybe it's a run-on sentence. The sentence, two sentences joined as one, right? Or you'll be able to easily realize the sentence is not complete, the idea is not complete. So when you read out loud, it's a very good proofreading strategy that will help you identify those mistakes. Print versus soft copy. If you wrote your assignment in a print copy using your pen, you want to type that out for your proofreading, right? If you use your computer, you want to print that for your proofreading. So just using the opposite medium will really help with your proofreading stage. Then you want to focus on recurring mistakes. Now, what you want to do is look at your previous assignments first, and what was the thing that you struggle with the most in terms of grammar. Is it your use of commas, or is it your use of subject-verb agreement? What is the current mistake that you've been making in the past? And you want to first of all highlight those. You want to focus on those, because also it's important that you show progress in your work, right? So then in proofreading your work there, you want to look at if a mistake appears twice in your work, then pay greater attention to it during the rest of your work. And when you come to me with your work regarding editing and proofreading, so regarding the grammar use, for example, what I do is I will pick up, a maximum of 4 mistakes, but usually 3 in your work. And then I tell you to go identify the rest and fix it. And then we look at that in the next session, simply because as academic literacy facilitators, we don't edit it for you, but we provide you with strategies on how to edit yourself or proofread yourself. So what I will do is I'll identify the first 3 mistakes, and then you will have an opportunity to look at the rest of the work, working on those mistakes, just so that you're able to learn the The aim is not to, fix it for you, but to provide you with skills and strategies that will enable you to fix it, because I will not write that test for you. I will not write that exam for you. And you may not have the opportunity to give it to me to have a look before you submit that exam. So enabling you to be able to do it yourself is what we do, right? And recurrent mistakes really help you to do that, to progress in your learning, because when a mistake keeps coming again and again and you're able to focus on that, then you're definitely able to improve on your work. Then you want to then ensure that you also look at your citations. So the thing you want to start with when proofreading your work is your cover sheet or your title page. So if you have been asked to include a cover sheet and you are submitting a hard copy, you want to attach that at the front of your assignments, right? Most assignments do not require a title page. Usually it is sufficient to just include the assignment title or the question at the top of the first page, including your student number in the header, right? So some assignments, based on the instructions, you're allowed to do that. With other assignments, you're asked to include a title page. So again, you want to check the instructions of your assignment to see, do you need a title page, or are you required to use a header that is include your details at the top of every page, or are you supposed to do both, right? Some assignments you have to do both. So you want to start with that. Then you want to check what are the components of this title page. So some assignments will specifically tell you what they want on the title page, right? So please check those instructions because lecturers usually, don't like it when you don't follow those instructions, and you may be penalized. So name, student number, course title, assignment number, assignment question, lecturer's name, and so on. What is the cover or the components of this content? You see, when it comes to proofreading, it's more than just the assignment question. Did you answer it correctly? Is the content correct? You see, it's more than that. You're looking at, do you have a title page? Did you number your pages? Did you use the right font sizes, and so on, right? Then when you're editing as well. All right, so when proofreading, there's a lot in terms of word count that is important, because some lecturers will tell you the length, the required length of the assignment, so the number of words, and you will usually get penalized if you don't adhere to these instructions. So unless the lecturer tells you these that these limits are strict, it's usually acceptable to do 10% below or above word count. So for example, if the assignment says a 200-word assignment, you could write between 100 and 1,800 words or 2,200 words, right? So 10% below or 10% above the word count is usually acceptable, but you try not to exceed that, right? And then if the assignment uses words like up to 2,500 words, so the word up to usually indicates that you should not exceed 2,500 words, right? So don't exceed that. Unless the lecturer tells you otherwise, the word limit usually does not include sections like the cover page, the table of contents, table of figures, reference lists, list of works cited, bibliography, or any appendices. So usually these words do not include those, except the lecturer said it's inclusive, right? If there's no mention of that, then your word counts will be your actual AC. Right, and these are the things you pay attention to when proofreading your work. Then the next thing is in terms of the word count. You want to, when editing, a lot of students struggle, and a lot of I've consulted with students who will say, Queen, my work is too long and I'm struggling to reduce the word count, or the word is too short, and I'm struggling to get it to the required word count. So with the next two slides, what we'll do is look at, in proofreading your work, how do you, let's say you're above word count and you want to reduce it, what is it that you need to do really reduce your word count, and what is it that you can do to increase the word count. All right. So what you want to do is don't try to remove single words from your assignment when you have too many words. It is unlikely that you will reduce any significant amounts of words, and it may confuse your argument. So sometimes taking out the words, will just make the sentence awkward without really creating a big effect in terms of word count. So instead, you want to remove sections of the assignment. So for example, let's say you're discussing the causes of poverty in Africa, right? And you included 5 different causes. So instead of taking out certain words here and there or reading sentences to make them concise, you could just remove one specific cause, right? So you discuss 4 causes. You could decide to take out one cause in its entirety, and that could solve the problem. Usually lecturers give you the word count because they know that, okay, for this amount of words, you should address the enough reasons. So, 3 reasons should be okay. And if maybe you did 5, taking out 1 will still make your work okay. You could, and that is why you will see some students will have, 1,800 words and have A grade, and others will have 2,000 words or 2,200 words and have a C grade. So sometimes it's not just about the quantity, but it's about quality. So think of it as quality. It's better to give equal attention to 3 paragraphs, provide good structure with appropriate topic sentences, supporting sentences, provide backup, than to have 6 different paragraphs where there is no support, there is no link. Some paragraphs are 2 sentences, others are 6 sentences. So it's better to give fewer points and greater details to them and support and give it attention than to have a lot of points without really providing the appropriate structure. So think of it as focusing more on the quality than just the quantity. Okay, so you want to then, you should not include something just because it's fact or just because it's included in the course material. So just always include information that is directly relevant. So in trying to reduce your word count, look at each section, each paragraph, ask yourself, firstly, in my introduction, right, this sentence that I've included, what section does it answer? So for example, is this the context? Is this the definition? Is this the aim? Is it the outline? What is not needed? If you included an example, for example, for instance, you can then take out that example because examples are not really needed in introductions, right? If you're doing your conclusion and you included a new point, you take that out, or too many references. You don't really need references in the introduction and conclusion. So maybe you can take that out to reduce the word counts, right? So thinking about what the required structure will really help you to take out unnecessary information, and that will help with your word count. Also, checking if the references that you included are directly answering the question, not just the question, but that specific paragraph. So does it link to the topic sentence of that paragraph? If it doesn't, that is possibly a digression and you should take that out, right? Be direct, state your points rather than writing many paragraphs leading to the point. So state your thesis, your topic sentence in one short sentence. What is it about, and then explain. If you explain using 4 or 5 sentences, remember, explanations are just to make it clearer. Perhaps, you're explaining a lot. For example, I know I tend to explain a lot. I mean, it's a quality of teachers. Teachers talk a lot. They keep explaining again and again. So sometimes, most often when I write an assignment, I usually am way above word count. So this strategy works for me, just trying to be more direct and, taking out a lot of explanation. So I'll say, okay, I will explain in 2 sentences. So I try to then summarize my explanation in 2 sentences and take out everything else, knowing that the next the third sentence will be my evidence, right? And the analysis to that evidence. So it kind of guides me to reduce those word counts. And actually, I usually advise it's better, and you'll see when you free write, when you write your work, it's advisable in fact, tomorrow we're looking at best writing practices. Free writing is important because when you first write, it's important to just put all the ideas on paper, and then knowing that when you're proofreading, you can then streamline it, bring it down, right? Or add it. So if you did not write enough, you can then start, zhuzhing it up. And if you wrote too much, you can then start streamlining the information, bringing it down. So just free write and then edit and proofread your work. And then another thing you want to do to really bring down those word counts is you can go back to the question and then which sections relate to the points and which sections are secondary. Then you can take out the secondary. So for example, some questions will ask you the causes and some students will discuss the causes and consequences. So you can then start taking out those consequences because the question is asking you to focus on the causes, and then you can maybe mention some recommendation or consequences in the conclusion, as a way forward, in a sentence or two. So just trying to make sure that you're focusing exactly on what the question requires of you and taking out any unnecessary information. So go back to the plan, which paragraph fits in the overall structure, which paragraphs overlap and can be combined, right? Then you can combine those and summarize. Now, sometimes some two points really speak, to each other. So what are those points? Maybe you can put them under a broader term like socioeconomic reasons instead of having social reasons and having economic reasons separately. You can maybe combine it to socioeconomic reasons, and that will really bring down your paragraphs, because two paragraphs then become one with separate example, one social example, one economic example, but discussing it under the umbrella of socioeconomic, and that will really bring down your word counts, right? So removing sections where you over explain, where you over specify, where you repeat yourself, or where you ramble, right? So another thing to reduce the word count is the examples. Now, examples are there to support your explanation, remember. So you've explained, or you have a topic sentence, you've explained already, you've provided evidence, and you're providing examples. So if you provided maybe 2 examples, perhaps you could bring it down to 1 example. And then also removing hedging language can help, things like it will seem that, it could be that, it should be that, hedging do not only weaken the strength of your argument, but it also just increases your word count, right? So these are the different strategies that you can use to really bring down, or proofread your work to reduce word count. Now, let's look at what you can do when proofreading your work to increase the word counts. Basically, you mostly do the opposite of what you did the first time around. All right. So you will do the opposite. So you want to see, did you not explain enough? So maybe if you explain using 1 sentence and you are way below below the word count, you want to then explain more. And one thing here that I would advise with adding is don't add 1 section. So let's say you decide you explain more. Now, do it equally amongst paragraphs. So let's say you decide you're going to add more explanation. Don't add on 1 paragraph and leave the rest, because then you will lose on cohesion. And the same applies for the previous slide, right? So if you're taking out maybe examples, don't take out examples only on 1 section. Remember, there needs to be equal weightings, right? Don't forget the editing process. There needs to be equal weighting. So if you remove an example in 1 paragraph, go remove it from all the other paragraphs, just so that there's that equal, weighting. So if you're adding an explanation, instead of adding 4-5 lines in 1 paragraph, thereby making 1 paragraph so long and the others short, you want to add 1 sentence on each paragraph, or 1 examples for each point, or 1 evidence for each point, right? So in extending, instead of extending 1 paragraph, try to extend the paragraphs equally, still ensuring cohesion within your work. So you want to make sure that every argument and your plan has been, expatiated on. Will the general reader understand your points? So some people just tend to be brief, unlike me who talks a lot. Some people are the opposite, and they just so brief. When they say something, it's like, okay, for someone who talks a lot like me, I'm like, is there more coming, or are we at the end already? So you expect more. So always ask yourself, are you clear enough? And some people's mind are just works in a way that they just assume that you have background information, or they assume you know this. Hence, the lesser information they give you, the better, right? But sometimes that is confusing in academic writing, because academic writing is all about repetition. I mean, you say something in the introduction, you expatiate on it in the conclusion, you repeat it in the past tense in the conclusion, and in the body paragraphs, you expatiate on it, and in the conclusion, you repeat it. So there's a lot of repetition in academic writing. So you have to really repeat yourself. So asking yourself, is your point really clear? Did you explain it enough? If someone else were to read this, will they understand it? Are there gaps in your argument? Does each point move logically from one to the other? Are the theories, well explained? Are these theories well backed up? How does this relate to the material from the lecturer or the study guides? Perhaps that could help in your analysis, which would increase the word count. Does the information answer your question fully? Are there complications or contradictions in the argument? Maybe you could explain them more, just providing what others are saying, especially in argumentative essays, that could add up onto your word count, just looking at the other side, what the other people are saying, and, backing it up could really stretch out your work, could flesh it out. Does any technology or terminology that you use need more explanation? Do you need more examples? Do you need to contextualize your work more? Do you need to explain more? Do you need to add more references, more analysis of your references, and so on? Are there aspects of the structure that you did not include? So maybe you did not include definitions in your introduction, maybe you did not include examples in your paragraphs, maybe you did not provide recommendations in your conclusion. So did you provide everything that is needed based on the conventions of that specific type of writing? So answering these questions will really help you to increase or flesh out those word counts. But again, try not to focus on one paragraph or one section. You want to do it across your entire paper, and that will help with the cohesion and coherence. You don't want to work on your cohesion by planning, brainstorming, following the structure, and then spoil that in the editing process where you're to fix it by focusing on one paragraph. Okay, so always look at your work on the wholesome, in its entirety. Okay, all right, let's carry on. All right, so you want to use your word check. You want to specifically look at your, words that are spelled quietly or closely the same, like angle and angel. Pay attention to those. Pay attention to your homonyms in your proofreading stage. So to, for example, eats and eats, the contracted form eats, it is, and it's for possessive pronoun belonging. You're for contracted form of you are, and you're for belonging, right? Possession. So also words that are pronounced the same but spelled differently and have different meaning, there, and there, where, and where, right? So you see they're all pronounced the same but written differently and having different meanings. So the word check will not pick those up as mistakes most often. But in this, it could be a contextual mistake. So it could be the wrong choice of word. So please just always look at that when you're proofreading. Pay attention to these three. Then you want to edit for tense and agreement, right? So try not to mix tenses in your work, except you're shifting in time and space. So you're talking about the past and coming to the present. But if you're reporting in the present, report in the present. If you're reporting the past, report in the past. Subject-verb agreement. Try to ensure that there's agreement between your verbs and subjects. You know, Lesedi went to school, or Lesedi goes to school. Lesedi and Rabaji go to school. We did that in the language and grammar workshop in more detail. So referring back to that, use the knowledge in that workshop to really edit your work for grammar and language. So you will look at, you know, confusing words like infer and imply, and these words, please pay attention to this. Effects and affect, those are different words. A lot of students use them interchangeably. So I'll challenge you to really please pay attention to these words and know how different they can be. Imply and infer, right? Describe angle. So imply is when the speaker suggests something without explicitly stating it. But infer is when the listener logically deduces something from the information given by the speaker. So used differently. Another example is affect and effect. Affect is normally used as a verb meaning to make a difference to. And effect is used both as a noun and a verb, which means a change that results from an action. So when you use these words, just double check that you're using them correctly. The next thing you want to look at is the use of apostrophe, right? We looked at this in the grammar workshop, but just making sure that you used it correctly. Some students use it, you know, wrongly to mean plurality. Just be mindful that with the plural form, we don't add an apostrophe. And if the word already has an S, we just add the apostrophe, not apostrophe S. And you also add apostrophe S in front of words that end with X, words that end with Z, right? And also watch out for the overly use of commas, the comma splices, and avoid long sentences as well. Then you want to watch out for its and its, right? Belonging and it has contracted form. You will see we say the car was wrecked. He slammed its door, right? Its door here belongs, the door belongs to the car, possession. Contrary to it's cold, to mean it is cold, right? Or a cold night. So you want to be careful with these two words. And the other ones we mentioned earlier, their meaning, right? They are, right? I'm going there tomorrow. Place. There's nothing you can do, right? They are going to Europe. They're going to Europe, right? Then we have advice and advice, another term that is usually confused. Its use is confused. As I always do, I base my workshop on common mistakes, mistakes that students commonly make, because that is what academic writing is all about, focusing on recurring mistakes, right? So just trying to highlight that so that if it's something you specifically struggle with, it kind of highlights that in your mind and you can focus on it, right? Advice is a verb. It means to tell someone what you think they should do or to give help or information. Advice with the C, on the other hand, means guidance for help. So you will say her advice, right? Her advice, yeah, noun form was very helpful. But when you use it as a verb, you know, the general advised the president to attack, right? This one is the verb, so it takes the S. So sometimes students use this interchangeably, so be careful with that. Then let's look at our affects and effects. Let's look at some examples, right? The wind will affect TV reception, right? Rheumatic fever affected his heart. The yen has an effect on the Kiwi dollar. The effects of the earthquake were felt in several countries. Note, effects can also mean to cause something, but this use is not very common, right? For example, he effected a political coup by sending in a private army, right? Year and year. Year means to perceive using the ears, whereas year means similar there, right? So I can hear the sound of the ocean in this shell. He's coming here tonight. Then we have lose and lose. So lose with the one S means to not succeed, to forfeit, to misplace. Lose with double O means not tight. So she will lose the race because of her ankle injury. He will lose his mobile phone if he keeps leaving it in the bathroom. Versus my wristwatch strap is too loose, or my belt is too loose, right? Again, students sometimes use this interchangeably. Principle and principle. Principle is a general belief, something you live by. A principle, on the other hand, can be used in two ways. It can be something important or someone in charge of a school. So you will say, I will not compromise my principles by taking a bribe. There are three laws of thermodynamics. The three laws of thermodynamics are basic principles of physics. Versus the principle gave me detention, or the principal problem is lack of discipline, right? So just be mindful of these words. Then we have to and to. To mean as well as, also excessive degree, and to mean direction. For example, cut up the onions and the garlic too, right? The soil is too dry for planting. They travel to Turkey. Please fax it to me. I'm going to search the cave, right? Then we have off and off. Off meaning to belong, to relating to. Off means away, cancel, right? The door of the car is stuck. The regular teacher of the class is absent today. I took the day off work. The lecture is off, right? So then you want to edit for punctuation. Please watch the end dashes. A lot of students confuse the hyphen and the M and N dashes. So the N and M dashes can be used interchangeably in this to add more information, as to include information in parentheses, information, non-essential information, just as you use a semicolon, just as you use interrupting commas. So please look out for this specific punctuation. Then for language, you want to check out for your first personal. Now, this is when you use I in your essays. Now, please double check this. There's a lot of debate around this. Some institutions, some lecturers are beginning to not mind students writing using the first person. But please just double check this for assignments. If it's a reflective essay, obviously you will write it using the first person, right? Because you're reflecting about your experience. So it will be using the first person. But if it's an argumentative essay, some lecturers prefer that you use, the third person. So you just want to double check that. You also want to check for the active voice. The active voice is usually shorter, brief, and more direct. But sometimes the passive voice is necessary. Negative forms, just avoid your double negative. Just go straight to the point. We use that for multiple choice for confusion. But when writing, just try to be as straightforward as possible. The easier you write, the simpler your language, the better, right? Yes, it's academic. It's not really about using difficult words and making it complicated. It's about communication. You want to communicate a message. The clearer, the better. Use a formal tone always. So avoid things like varsity, rather say university. Then you want to proofread for referencing, right? So when proofreading, you want to check your in-text referencing, making sure you have the names, the year, the page numbers. You want to check for the order of the names as well. Now, the order of the names are very important, and I think I didn't touch on this yesterday. I completely forgot to mention this yesterday. But when referencing, the order of the names are kind of important. I think I kind of touched on it, but not fully, right? Firstly, you need to check that if you look at names on a book, place it in the same order. I mentioned this yesterday, but what I did not mention was the order of the names should be alphabetical when you're synthesizing. And I did not speak about synthesizing as well yesterday. So I'm going to quickly talk about this. So when you reference, synthesizing information is very important. So let's say you are talking about, corruption. as a cause of poverty in Africa. So let's say the World Health Organization supported that, the UNICEF supported that, and maybe an author called Sithole supported that, and Rabaji supported that. So now we have 4 authors that spoke about corruption that leads to poverty. So instead of separating them to say the World Health Organization stated that corruption, this number of people were corrupted and it led to poverty. And the UNICEF also said that, and Rabashi further mentioned that, and Sithole added that. So instead of separating them in this manner and having 4 separate sentences of authors saying the same thing, what you want to do is to synthesize that information. So synthesizing simply means, bringing that information together in 1 or 2 sentences. So you kind of summarize what all these authors are saying, and then at the end of that summary, you include all 4 authors, right? So then in including this information, you want to put it in alphabetical order, right? So it's going to be, so we have WHO, the World Health Organization, that is W. We have UNICEF, U. We have Rabaji, R. We have Sithole, S, right? So which letter comes first, right? It's Rabaji, it's R, right? So you will say Rabaji. Let's say he wrote his article in 2013. Then the next name you will put will be Sithole, right? It's S before STUW, right? Right, so it will be Sithole. You wrote your book in 2019, right? Then it's the WH STU. It's U first, so it's going to be the UNICEF, right? 2000 and let's say 20, and then WHO 2022. Okay, so you have to place the order when synthesizing the order of your authors need to be in alphabetical order, which is different from, let's say, these 4 people wrote one book and the first name to appear, let's say, was the WHO. So you will say, you will start with the WHO. So you will maintain that order and you say an or, right? So the first name is the one you will use. Or the first time you mention them, you will include them, or in the reference list, you include them as per how they included it in the on the article. You will not change the order. But if you're synthesizing information, then please remember to include them in alphabetical order. Okay, this is just something I didn't mention yesterday. So if you attended yesterday's workshop, I'm glad I'm mentioning this. And also just note that synthesizing is really important. It's a skill in academic writing that always gives you more marks, right? So when you synthesize, your ability to synthesize information really shows that you're able to understand different arguments and categorize them based on, the different themes. So those that agree to, those that disagree, and so on. And it just will help also if you're reducing and you wrote too much and you're trying to reduce the word count. Synthesizing is another good strategy you could use, right? Because instead of separating them, Rabaji said this, Sithole said this, Lesedi said this, Moawo said this. If they're saying the same thing, summarize everything and then include all these references at the end. It will summarize your work, but will also demonstrate strong academic writing skills, right? So after checking the order of the names, you also want to check for the punctuation in your referencing, making sure that all the punctuations based on your Harvard guide or the APA guide has been adhered to. If you did not attend the referencing workshop, please attend the next one or next month. As that is truly an important workshop in your academic journey. It will be repeated next week, the 20th. So on Tuesday next week, we will be doing referencing and plagiarism again. All right, so let's carry on. Then you want to check your reference list. First thing, is it in alphabetical order? Something very, we know that the reference list should be in alphabetical order, but even I sometimes forget to mention that when I'm, assisting students with their work. So please always remember to put that list in alphabetical order. What I sometimes do is to use Excel, because if you go to Excel, you just place your list there. That is if you're not using a software, right? If you're using your software, it automatically places it in alphabetical order. But if you're doing it manually, then you can just place your list. What I do, in order for me not to make a mistake, sometimes, we all went to primary and did ABC, but that's years back, and it's just too many references and you can make a mistake, especially with names that are the same. Then you have to move to the title and so on. You could get confused. So to avoid that confusion, what I do is I just copy everything and put on the Excel document, and then I highlight it, and then I go to sort. And then I sort it based on alphabetical order, and then everything is just in alphabetical order, and I copy that and paste it back into the Word document, right? And then everything is in alphabetical order. I don't have to worry about that. All right. Then you want to check that the title of the books and journals are italicized. You want to remove every hyperlink. Most guides will ask you to remove the hyperlink. Provide the access dates for internet sources, especially when there's no year for the APA. But check your Harvard as well. Some Harvards don't want you to include the available dates, but the UNISA Harvard we saw yesterday, you should include available dates. Check for punctuation also, even in the reference list, and then check that every information is accurate and matches the in-text citation. So sometimes students will include a citation within the text, but forget to include it at the reference list. If you're using the plagiarism software, it automatically fixes that for you. But if you're doing it manually, you could forget, especially if you're not referencing as you go. If you're leaving it at the end, you could forget to include some references. So with your formatting with the Word, you want to check the font sizes. So what I would do is I would just unshare my slide and share a Word document. All right, so this is your Word document. So what you want to do is to first start. So you see here, I hope you can see my Word document. So what you want to do with the formatting is to check for first home. So you highlight your document. So you control all, just control all your documents. Okay. And then what you want to do is to check the theme first, right? They would usually tell you Calibri, or they want Arial. A lot of lecturers prefer Arial or Calibri, right? Or Times Romans. So you see here Arial, you click Arial. So you see all your work will then change to Arial, or if it's Calibri, you choose your Calibri, then can you see it changes to Calibri, or if it's Times New Romans, there we go, Times New Romans, you change to Times New Romans. So that is the theme. So what theme does your assignment ask for, right? What is the theme font that is asking for, right? Theme fonts, right here. Hope you can see that. Then the size, it will always tell you Calibri 12. So you come here, you've highlighted. So even if you start typing and it's on that, always go back and highlight the entire document, because we're working with technology. There will be some articles you copy paste, especially direct quotes, you copy paste it, or you will copy paste and then paraphrase it. Once you've copied paste, sometimes the word automatically adjusts itself to the new theme from the document you've copied pasted. Then that entire paragraph will follow that theme. And then you find students' work where there's 3, 4, 5 different theme fonts, right? So you want to make sure that you highlight at the end when you're done with everything. This should be the last thing you do, right? At this stage, you don't want to copy paste things into your work again. So when you're done with your editing and every other aspects of your proofreading, then you want to double check for the formatting. So then you will choose Arial 12. Just be careful. The titles are usually maybe bigger. So if you can choose the entire document maybe on a 12, then you go back to the title and then increase them again. If you use the automatic titles, so you're using your, headings, there's a way to choose heading 1. So the headings automatically is 1, and then headings 2, headings 3, you see here, when you want automatic headings, so you highlight the heading. So you can, first of all, do the font, the size here, and then you can now go to your headings and put heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So your headings would automatically add, and you can then automatically add a table of contents, right? And then the next thing, that when you use the heading, you can add a table of contents easily, right? You can just come here and insert a table of content. Cover page here, you can then insert your, oh, this is the table. You can then insert the table of contents as well. Right. The next thing you highlight, once you've highlighted, what you want to do is to align. You want to justify, sorry. You see here, these arrows. If I press here, see what happens. Everything goes to the middle. Yeah, everything goes on the left. Yeah, everything goes on the right. So what you want to do is to align your work. So make sure you always on the Control All, click here to highlight, to align or justify. And then here you want to check, they will always tell you calibrate 16, 1.5 spacing, right? So these are the spacing right here. So 1.5 spacing is that, and then 2 spacing is this, right? You see it's bigger, or if 1 spacing is this. So check for the spacing as well. So this is your dictionary. You see here it's English South Africa, right? You can change it to America, or you can choose whatever, and that automatically underlines. You see this is English United Kingdom, United States, and so on. So you can click there so that the words will automatically be, according to that specific type of English that you're using. So this is the fonts. In terms of formatting, these are the different things that you want to look at. So I'll just go back. Just so that I don't change anything to my document. Okay. Okay, and then you also want to insert the number pages. I'm just looking at the presentation, so you want to make sure you've inserted, the page numbers. So you will come on your header here, and then you can insert your name and student number, right? Once you're done, you can then close the header. We review, there's your language as well. Okay, let's check on the slide. What else? Okay, I think that's it in terms of, the proofreading. So I'm going to stop sharing my Word document and reshare my slides so we can conclude. Then you want to check for your contractions, check for your capitalizations, and so on. All right, so this is what I was explaining. This has been explained, set page at this and Times Roman, double spacing and all of that. So then just like the end of the editing, you want to also have certain questions to ask yourself at the end of your proofreading, grammar, spelling, punctuation, and usage correct throughout my work. Are the verb tenses appropriate? Are the pronouns clear? Do they have abbreviations and acronyms? If so, did you introduce them the first time and then using the abbreviations or acronyms subsequent times? Are the numbers clear? Did you number your pages? Did you cite your work clearly? Did you reference all of your work appropriately following your guide? Did you cite all sources cited within the text at the reference list? Is your language appropriate? So just having a list at the end where you can actually tick them. This is really important for editing and proofreading. So kind of benchmarking yourself, right? To ensure that you've adhered to everything that you're supposed to do will really help you with your editing and proofreading process. Okay, I think I should have added this by mistake. So, okay, so I need to shift this here. This is the answer to the activity that we did earlier. So today we have looked at editing and proofreading. We have looked at what you need to do to edit your work. We saw that editing is really focusing on content and structure, while proofreading is focusing on the mechanics, so such as language, grammar, referencing. We saw that these two processes should be separate, so you need to start with your editing first before moving on to your proofreading. We saw that when editing, you need to focus on the content, the structure. If you answer the question correctly, the different conventions of different types of writing, your report writing, abstract, and so on. And then you need that list at the end to double check everything. And with your proofreading, you need to check your grammar, the punctuation, homonyms, you need to check for your referencing, and you need to check for the formatting. And you also need a list to just double check that everything has been done appropriately. Just remember to use the knowledge from how to write an essay, how to structure your work to be able to edit your work appropriately. Have a lovely evening, and thank you so much for taking the time to attend this session.